So what is going on, FutureDDS family? It's Tyler here with Terrell and Nick, and we are here to bring you another podcast episode. What's going on, y'all?
What's up, man?
It's not much.
We're here on a Sunday today. This week.
Here on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Things got a little complicated last week. We were super busy, working on something for you all. But I actually had to go out of town, so we weren't able to shoot on our normal podcast date. I went to another CE course in Dallas that focused on occlusion and full mouth reconstructive cases. And it was great, but it definitely made me realize I have a lot of work to do. But it was humbling, but it was good. I think that, especially when you've been doing kind of the same thing over and over again, it's good to kind of see how other people are doing it and how they're kind of implementing their techniques and implementing their craft. So it was a good weekend, great weekend, but that is what has led us to be here today on Sunday. Man, my days are getting confused and everything.
Hey, man, happens that quick, right?
Hey, man. But no. We thought it would be a pretty cool idea for us to talk about just some of the differences that we saw once we actually started working in the real world compared to, dental school. I think that when you're going through dental school, you kind of make these assumptions of what dentistry will be. And to be real with you, they're very different. And even what you thought it would be can be very different if you allow it to be. And so we're going to kind of just do a quick little dive on that. And hopefully this message reaches somebody and helps somebody out when it comes to managing expectations, or helps people out, to make sure that they craft the situation that they want to in regards to their dental career. So yeah.
Sure.
I mean, you want to start it off, Terrell? Or you want me to go?
Man, so I can dive into a little bit of more so the college or the dental school experience, and just even jumping in the clinic. So you have this conceived notion of what treating a patient is going to be, and obviously when you're in dental school, you have this great excitement about okay, I finally get to see a patient, finally get to do a fill-in, finally get to do these things that you've been basically working for through undergrad, through if you do a master's program, gap years, whatever, and pretty much your first 2 years of dental school to work towards. All right. So you get there and you get so caught up in doing the actual work itself, or doing the filling, or thinking about the technical so much that you don't even think about as much of the practice stuff. And granted, in dental school, it's not like you get a huge amount of practice experience outside of doing externships, kind of seeing how your dental clinic is run maybe, or a course within school. But I think that day to day, having a limited amount of patients, of course, as well as just not even having that mindset. You're focused so much on translating things from pre-clin to actual clinic or seeing a patient that you don't necessarily understand the processes that go on through a day-to-day of dental practice. So one of the biggest transitions for me I guess transitioning from dental clinic to actual practice would be how many things you actually have to juggle. In dental school, you think you have so many things to juggle in terms of studying, clinic, things outside of school, trying to get the graduation, this rotation, paperwork to fill out by graduation, all stuff. But honestly, you get more work when you're done. And it's crazy when you think about it, because you would think it's not as many things that you have to worry about in terms of getting prep checks and note swipe, different things like that. But you got to understand, instead of doing prep checks, you might be in the middle of doing some fillings, and you have a hygiene check to do, or you have two hygiene, depending on how many hygienists you have. You might have 2 or 3 hygiene checks to do. On top of that, you still have to make sure your dental assistants are starting your notes, or you're writing your notes after patients, or at the end of the day, different things like that, where as though I can't say you'll get more leeway in dental school, but there's less things that you have to focus on, even though you're more hyper focused on those things, if that makes sense. So I think one of the biggest transitions for me was just learning how to juggle, not necessarily more, but juggling things that are new to you, and learning how to be efficient at those systems when you're not exactly sure how the office works, maybe as a transition, or they may use a whole different dental chart system than you use in dental school. So there's a lot of other little things that you have to get adjusted to that you don't think about in dental school, that aren't necessarily the biggest, I guess the biggest burdens on your brain when you worried about CDCA or licensing, things like that. So there's a lot of other things. And even what we talked about similarly when we were talking about leadership and just like managing a team, like there's a lot of other aspects. But I think the bigger challenge to me was one, getting that system down and balancing the new things without necessarily having the grace and that time, that extra time that you might have, and that kind of I would say the training wheels of dental school, so to speak. Like, yeah, I think the clinical has to almost become second nature to a certain extent. That's why you just have to focus on getting really good in dental school with the basics, so that when you're getting into the practice, the basics are at least second nature. You always get better at it, but at least you won't have to focus as much on doing this class 2 prep or doing this quad of fillings or doing this crown prep or this core and crown. And you can focus more on, okay, let me be efficient while I'm doing this so I can be efficient doing everything else.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. But even kind of like piggybacking off of that, and something that I kind of picked up this weekend was more so just the art of how you do something. We have, and I'll speak for myself, but because we were going through dental school and we were taught to use 245 bird and do X and X and do this and do that, I have been using those same methods pretty much throughout my entire career. Whereas, I think now that I have become more comfortable with doing crown preps and doing these things, I'm almost more so excited to go a little bit deeper and try out different things and really kind of have my set of ways that I've decided on instead of them being things that somebody else told me to do. So even for example, like which burrs I use, how I treatment plan, how I do XXX. I think that like now it's about more so taking control of my career and really pursuing it the way that I want to. And what I was really thinking about it while I was at this conference or whatever, or the CE course, and I was like, wow, because I started my career within a situation where I was seeing a lot of patients a day, I didn't even necessarily have time to sit back and really think about what I was doing, if that makes sense. Because of my lack of time, I had to just go ahead and do the default thing that I was taught in dental school, which was still great. It still was great work. But now I'm definitely trying to take control of things in the point of like, okay, why do I use this type of system? Why do I like to use, a 10K file right before? Why am I doing XXX? Like all these different things I really want to take more control of. And that's what I was going to say. One thing about dental school that is, a difference between dental school and the real world is just really your autonomy of what you want to do and really being set in that, right? So another example, I was talking to a whole bunch of docs and they were like, hey, you should go and next time you talk to your lab guy, next time you go visit them, you should ask them this. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, I've actually never visited my lab. I have a local lab. I've never gone in there. I've never had like in-depth conversations of like, okay, what's the best way for you to read my preps? What do you feel like is the biggest mistake coming from docs? Granted, I use zirconia crowns now, but I'm like, okay, is there anything else? Let me see how this type of crown looks, how this type of crown, why does this crown cost this versus this? But little things like that, really, really taking autonomy of my career is something that, I think I had to shift gears on because you're in school for so long and people are realistically telling you what to do. But now as the doctor, it's really on you to make those decisions. And the best thing about it is nobody's going to question you. Right? Like, I mean, granted, if you're working under somebody, okay, maybe, but at the end of the day, you are the doctor. And if you don't want to do something a certain type way, you don't have to do it. So don't. And I think that that's another great thing. And I think that a lot of you all, especially when you go into your associate position, remember that, because I think that it's very easy for us to be kind of like not pressured, but almost like herded to do certain things just because it's the way they are. And I saw that a lot when I worked at my previous DSO, which I had a great experience at my previous DSO. Great experience. I had a great mentor doc with me, but I came in and they were telling me about this medication for perio, right? And they're like, yeah, we do this, and they're like, do this when you see a 5 plus on your probing depths. And I was like, okay, but then I really sat back and I was like, hold on, but why? What is this material? I know nothing about this material. Why do you all just assume that I'm going to use it, and then you just are telling me just to do this because that's just what it is, and that I should just trust you because you've been doing this longer, you all have seen blah 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 blah. And granted, they could be absolutely right, but it's a great feeling knowing it's a great feeling and a great responsibility knowing that I still should do my own research, and and the fact that like I don't have to do something just because somebody tells me to do is a huge change and a huge benefit that I'll definitely am trying to take more advantage of, especially now, especially after like talking to a bunch of older docs and just seeing how they move, even as low or as small as my schedule, right? Whereas like I have the autonomy to say, what, look, I'll be doing a root canal. I don't want to, don't book anything else on my second column when I'm doing my root
Right.
canals because I want full focus. Like I can say that. And I think before I was a little bit more nervous because, I didn't want to kind of like outstep my role, or, I wanted to make sure that I was still doing what's best for the practice.
Right.
But in the grand scheme, it's just kind of like, no. Let's do what's best for the patient. And if I need that sole hour just with one patient to make sure that that root canal is the best that it can be, then that's what I'm going to take. So yeah, not the tangent, but yeah, that's a couple of things I noticed for sure.
I think that for Nick it will be a little bit different because he has the mentality of going into OS, but I think also a big thing between dental school and actual practice is, like you said, the autonomy of being able to choose what you want to do, but literally being able to sculpt your scope of practice. So
yes,
if you want to do surgeries, like there's unlimited amount of CEs that you can do. Whereas though in dental school, it's like you have to do these certain things for requirements. You have to do these things where, God forbid, pay, for our instance, we were in a pandemic. So some of those patients that maybe are looking for more elective work, or some of those patients that are maybe have extenuating circumstances where they aren't able to come in the clinic, like you're not able to see as many things. And through virtue of just like trying to get out of school, making sure that the school itself, making sure that everyone's getting adequate experience and doing all these things, like sometimes you get limited in what you're able to do, which is good because you do, again, get to focus on like mastering the basics and doing the things that you need to do in order to be a proficient doc. But at the same time, like now, it's like if you want to do implants, go focus on implants. If you don't want to do endo, refer out your endo. Like Tyler says, making sure he has time in the second column. Like, don't even put it on your column, but make sure you're filling your schedule with other things that you want to do, you want to get better at, things that you feel like you're more proficient at and you're more efficient at. That may be, a better use of your time or a better use of your scheduling. So having that autonomy as well, not having to worry about, getting a chair or making sure that like working with certain pros faculty or perio faculty, or your, the lead in your practice, group practice in school, um, having to feel like, especially in school, you're learning things, you can ask these questions, but you always kind of defer back to, I guess the faculty, because they're really teaching you. They're literally there to teach you. So being able to choose your teachers, being able to choose your leaders and your mentors, and not necessarily having a system that you need to fit into in terms of school or things like that, but being able to basically build your own system of doing things. I'm sure, Nick, like you're going to find this out. Like you'll be, even once you finish up school and you're in the workforce, like you're going to be like, okay, I like doing these type surgeries. Who do I need to talk to get better at them? What kind of materials do I like to use? What kind of techniques do I want to use? But I guess like a good question for you now would be like, what is from what you've learned so far, like what do you feel like your expectations of what dental school clinic will be? Is it similar to like what we've been saying, or is it, especially at your school, I'm sure you've talked to some students that have been there and everything, like, what have they said has been the biggest transition from, getting into clinic or being a student doc versus being an actual doc?
Well, I haven't really talked to them about like what their transition was like going from sim lab to clinic,
Right.
but my expectation, like the way I view it, is that it's super scary. Like even
Mm.
now when I'm thinking about it, like when
Yeah.
I can't imagine that feeling of having your first patient ever. Like, and I know you have like small steps to build up to, oh, finally doing a filling and finally doing a crown, but it's just like when that first time when it's the real deal, you're really providing for someone who needs to who needs your help. Like that just seems so scary. Like I feel like how can you have that much confidence in your abilities to be able to do that for the first time? So for me, that my expectation of that just sounds really scary. Like, but that's how you grow. And as like making that transition from dental school to being a dentist, well, that I feel like that process might be a little bit easier than going from sim lab to clinic. But as a dentist, like I feel like there's like the pros and cons, like the pros being uh you don't have to like study on the weekends if you don't want to, but like it's always you have that freedom to grow if you want and chill if you don't want to grow. It's fine. And but something that I don't think I really gave much thought is how tiring a work day can be. And I think I've seen that with you guys. Like,
Man.
when you meet after you guys have a day of work, you probably don't have that much energy to like do other things that you love, but that's fine because it's a work day, and then when you come home you rest for the next day. um but yeah, like I feel like those are my expectations so far. I don't know, is any of it wrong, or are they right?
I mean, you're not wrong. So I think the biggest thing is I think especially as and maybe it's just our mentality or like how we've always decided to move is that you're always gonna have something to do outside of work. Like that whole in dental school you have to study. Like on top of studying, we wanted to do this. You want to go spend time with your friends. You wanted to travel. You want to do these things. You want to build things outside of work. So that wasn't necessarily as hard of a transition when you got into the, it almost you almost got more time outside of work, which was cool. It just like you said that the tax of the day, um, like physically more so and mentally because you're like in school, you're worried about making sure you're doing it right, so you get a check off. You're not necessarily worried about dealing with 30 patients or however many patients you have to see, then dealing with like managing a whole team. So you have to deal with so many personalities, and that's almost just as taxing. Like I think the ability to compartmentalize has to be way more honed in once you're done with school. Like school, everything that you do typically is wrapped around school in some way, whether it's studying, seeing patients, writing notes, like all the stuff is pretty much wrapped around school and getting to that final goal of graduation. Whereas though after school, you gotta like compartmentalize work. Then you gotta compartmentalize like if you want to do something outside of work, you gotta make sure that you have enough time or like setting time away from that. And then even within work, if you want to keep getting better, like it's not studying and then asking a professor like a new technique or trying to try something new in clinic. Like you really gotta go take a class or you really have to like um basically just do your own studying. You got to go look at these new techniques. Like, okay, and then have enough wherewithal that throughout the day of you trying to get things done quickly and efficiently, you're like, okay, I did see this better way of doing it, or I do remember this better way of doing it, or this other way of doing it that might actually work better in this scenario. Let me do that now,
Mm-hmm.
and to an extent, it's like you just have to continue to progress in that way. Like in school, you'll get to a point you might have a checkpoint, and the professor's like, "Try this, do this," and will sit next to you and allow you to do it. But then when you're in clinic, it's like, or when you're in practice now, it's like, "Oh, I remember seeing a professor do it this way when this happened. I'm going to do it this way." You try it. You might use a material that doesn't necessarily, like you might use a quick set versus a regular set, and now you're like, okay, I got to start from scratch again. So it's like it will set you back 10 minutes in the day, but at the same time, I feel like I learn more from doing that and having to tap back into that memory bank and the techniques that I'm learning outside of school and really trying to hone in on. versus feeling like I have that fallback in school, if that makes sense. So to an extent, it's like a different mental tax. Like it's like you're working out differently, and thinking a little bit more creative now because you have so many tools that you can use and like ways of doing things versus in school, like Tyler said, you have a set way of doing things and you have a set like step process and checks and balances that you have to adhere to. So it's cool. I like it. I wouldn't trade it back. I'll say that much.
Here's the thing. I was gonna ask, like, do you expect this, like, the stuff that's mentally taxing right now, do you expect it to become easier in the future?
100%.
Or do you think it's always going to be there?
I think that the things that we're focused on right now, absolutely. But I also think that there will never be a time when we're not, I think mental tax comes with growth, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore I feel like if it's not this, it'll be something else. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
But not even just kind of like
yeah,
piggybacking off of what Terrell was saying. Like, even like, it's funny that I just thought about it. I feel like I actually have to be more structured now in real life. When he was talking about you have to compartmentalize everything, like, it's so true. Whereas it's like everything did revolve around school. And at the end of the day, like, school was everything. Like, everybody's big goal was to graduate. So it was a lot easier. But now that we're out, we're living our lives. People have families. People are pursuing other things. People are trying to stay healthy. People are getting older, so we have to stretch. Like, all these different things. I feel like I'm on more of a schedule now than I was when I was in dental school, which is very, very interesting. But,
it sounds crazy,
cool.
but it
sounds
true.
Crazy. It sounds crazy, but it's so true. Like, you have to be so much more thoughtful for even little things. Like, Terrell and I, a couple of our friends are graduating, so we got to say, okay, let's go ahead and let's map out these trips. Let's do this, let's do that. Everybody's taking implant courses. Okay, how can we all kind of collaborate on these things? Like, it just takes a lot more forward thought also, which can be, it's great because we're prepared, but also can be a lot in a certain aspect. Like, even for example, another thing I thought about, when I'm referring to these specialists, how, like, I really don't even know the specialists. And I think that sometimes we as general dentists, and what you'll come to see, Nick, I mean, granted, you will be the specialist, so it's a little different. But a specialist will kind of come and try to court us in order to receive some type of referrals, right? Because if I'm sending a doc, maybe 10 patients a month for endo, whatever it may be. But I'm like, okay, another thing that I need to do, me forward thinking, is let me go and let me reach out and let me grab dinner with this doc. And even I'll pay, but I just need to make sure that even who I'm referring to, are you a good person? If these are my patients, I want to know your character. I want to know, I mean, I know you can do your job because, of course, you are a licensed endodontist or whoever you may be, or licensed or a surgeon, but are you a good person, and are you really somebody who I want my patients to, associate with myself? Because if I'm sending them to you, they're going to say, okay, you are a reflection of Dr. Brown. So just a lot of things, man, a lot of things. And on top of that, still learning dentistry. Like, we're constantly learning new things. And every day is different, like, and especially if we want it to be. And I think that's another challenge that I'm going to definitely, challenge all my friends, like, make every day different. I think it's very easy for us to kind of hop in this bag where, oh, yeah, I just did a bunch of hygiene checks today. Oh, I just did a couple crowns. It was nothing, normal day. But, like, from what I learned this weekend, you can always go a step deeper, right? And you can look at certain things. You can start, checking out, patients' TMJ joints. You can check out, of course, do your oral cancer screening. You can do all these different things to make every day new and make every day exciting and make every day a learning opportunity. So yeah, a lot. There's a lot of differences.
Yeah, it keeps expanding, bro. Every time you learn something new, it's going to keep expanding, man. And it stacks on itself like, building blocks just of. And it goes back to, like, the more you know, the more you'll want to explore, like.
Or the more you know, the more you find out you don't know.
Exactly.
Like, literally, they were talking about stuff I had never heard of at all in these courses. Like, and these are basic things. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. But they've been practicing for 25 years. and they're researching, they're reading all the articles, like all the journals that come out, they're reading all. That's just a lot, man. But it made me excited because what everybody has to remember, even when you're in dental school, you are working on your craft. It is a craft. And like once you kind of add that like artistic aspect to it, you almost kind of appreciate it a little bit more. And so yeah, there's a lot to it, man. But we're excited. It's gonna be a fun journey for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's a solid synopsis of the differences of dental school processes and dental school clinic versus real life clinic and the day to day and the processes of that. Major things is just one, the more you know, the more you'll be able to do, and the things that you do know will continue to get easier. But obviously, as dentists, we have to worry about new techniques, new procedures, new materials, all of that. So as long as we're excuse me, as long as we're wanting to expand, and as long as we're wanting to learn more, there will always be something for us to expand in and venture into. So that's the awesome part about the profession itself. And that's why it's always the practice of dentistry, and it's not just the master dentist. Like everyone, you can have a mastery of it, but you're still practicing. There's always going to be something new for you to learn. So I think that will be a good wrap up for this podcast episode. If you guys have any questions for us about our dental school experiences or about our first year as being practicing docs, things that we've learned, things that we any more specific questions about things that we learned or things that you are interested in learning more about, just hit us up, add it to the comments down below, send us a DM on Instagram _FutureDDS. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited to hear Nick's perspective once he actually gets in the clinic. And
oh yeah,
I know he's gonna be fine, but it's just like you said, it's a cool transition to see. So looking forward to seeing that coming in the future. But yeah, we'll be back for another episode of FutureDDS Podcast next week. Y'all stay tuned. Thanks for listening and tuning in. All right, y'all.
Yep. All right, y'all.